All right. Good evening, good people. As usual, it is Thursday, and that means it is time for some Bible study. We are in Genesis 16 today. I do not have a PowerPoint, and so that means it's easier for people on Facebook and TikTok to be able to just follow with what I'm saying and they can read on their own because we don't really have maps and stuff. And so it was a little easier for me not to have to do a PowerPoint today. But I'm excited to share the word nevertheless. Um, Remember, we've been talking about Abram. And I know we love to talk about Abraham, but very rarely do we explore the fact that when he's introduced to us, he is Abram. And it is that way for at least 10 to 11, 15 years, maybe. We're still in it, where he's still called Abram. And so that whole time, we're learning about his faith. We talk about the righteousness of Abram. We talk about the righteousness of Abraham, but it was when he was Abram that was declared. And so don't forsake the beginning of something as who you are in your faith, because just like Abram had to grow into Abraham and being that father and all the things that came afterwards and his blessings, he was Abram. And we study him as Abram. And God didn't say, like, oh, you're less than because you were Abram. He was the same person who God called him when he was Abram. And so when God called his name, changed his name to Abraham. So we are talking about Abram today. We're going to jump into Genesis 16. I am going to share my screen and we're just going to get started with reading it. Per usual, we read all the way through and then we jump into verse by verse, going line by line. And this should be relatively, it might be like a shorter Bible study than what we've done in the past, but it's still important to go through the details of what we learn about the story. This is Abram's first son, Ishmael, and how all of that developed. Because remember, we have been talking about Abram when he moved from Haran. He moved to Bethel. He went to Egypt. He then came back from Egypt. He got in the war, saved Lot, then been blessed by Melchizedek. Um, he has not taken the land, but he has occupied the land well. And so we are now into just some more of like his personal development. Remember, God really just got done talking to him about, you know, confirming that this is a covenant with him. And so now we're going into more of his story because he has promised him specifically a son, not his servant to be a heir. He has promised that Abram will have a son. And so we just kind of see how that plays out over time. So let's jump into it. So we have Genesis 16. It says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian servant and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is all your fault. I put my servant in your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. Abram replied, look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who has who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" So that well was named Ber Lahai Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Okay, now we're going to take it up to the top and we're going to walk it through verse by verse. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him. Remember, we just got done with the chapter that is talking about you are going to have a descendant. He's talking to directly to Abraham. You are going to have a son of your own. Not your servant's going to be your heir. You will have a son. And it's telling us in the beginning of this, setting the precedent that Sarai had not been able to bear children for Abram. Okay, we want to have children. God has promised you a child. Let's have a child. Not able to have a child. Had not been able to have a child whole time when they was in before they left and went to um, Haran. Had not had a child since they left Haran when Abram was 75 years old. No child, right? And it says she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. Now, remember, when they first left Haran, they traveled through Bethel, um, stopped, but they kept going to Egypt when there was a famine in the land. So where did Hagar come from? She's an Egyptian servant. So very likely she came from when they went to Egypt. Remember when they went to Egypt and Pharaoh saw how beautiful Sarai was, or Sarai. If I'm saying the name wrong, forgive me. But they saw how beautiful she was, and he wanted to take her as his own wife. Well, remember, Abram was then blessed with servants and gold and silver and donkey, cattle, and all the things at that time anyway. So it's possible that Hagar either came from when they went to Egypt then, or she was an Egyptian slave that they had gotten in Haran when they were still in Haran. So either way, she is a servant, somebody who she is master to, master over, and that's Hagar. They are not equals. Sarai would be the employer. Hagar would be the employee kind of situation. Okay, so Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. Why? Because Sarai has not been able to have children, and Abram knows that he's supposed to have a child. And so, unfortunately, rather than at this time asking God specifically about Sarai, her name had never come up in the revelations that God had given. So Abram thought that was a good idea. Like, okay, because it's also not a uncommon thing for you to have a surrogate, if you will, that they have the child, but it's yours. I know it's not common in our day, but that would not be uncommon to have a surrogate. So it seemed like a normal thing. It seemed pleasing to both of them, and not in a way of like, oh, I want to get a second wife, but because of the fact that he wanted to have children, that was the decision. Okay, so Sarai gives Abram permission. Abram did not ask. This is Sarai's idea. Abram did not ask for this. He wants a child, but he did not ask for her to give the slave or servant. But she tells him, "Go and sleep with my servant, and I can have children through her." So technically, what that sounds like to me is that she very well so intended for the child that Hagar was to bear to be her child. She would have considered it to be her child, not Hagar's child. So it says Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian servant and gave her to Abram as a wife. So this is very much so like giving permission to have a second wife. I'm not debating on whether or not that's something that should be done in this day and time. I'm just saying that this is something that was obviously approved and something that was looked favorably upon in their culture at the time. So this says it gives us a timeline. And now we start to get a little timeline, just a little tiny bit of Abram's life. So it says this happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So he left Haran at 75 years old. 10 years later, this is happening. So that means all that we read about with Abram from chapter, what was that, 12? We started with the story of Abram from Genesis 12 when he's being called at 75. All that has happened in the last 12, 13, 14, 15, now the 16th chapter, the last five chapters has happened in a 10-year time span. We don't get to understand what happened in what year, but we know within a 10-year time span, Abram left Haran, got to Egypt, got kicked out of Egypt, went to went to Bethel. Him and Lot split. He had the war. He fought in the war and won. Got Lot back. He moved to Mamre. He lived with the Amorites. He's heard from God. All of these events is happening in that sequential order. Is happening within this 10-year period. So you have to fill in the blanks. But we just get to know that kind of like what happened in that era, if you will. It's okay that we don't know the exact dates that it happened, but we know that these are the things that took place in his life. So we get that 10-year period. So this is still happening. He's still Abram. For 10 years, he's still Abram. He is at this point, he will be 85 years old when this whole conversation is happening. We'll take my servant. He's 85 because he was 75 when they left Haran. So it says, so Abram had sexual relations with Hagar. So he marries Hagar via sexual relations, and she became pregnant. When Hagar knew she was pregnant, once she knew, so let's say 30, 60 days, obviously somewhere between that time, she's going to know that she's pregnant. Once she knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. So instead of her being a humble servant and her still like being able to complete her duties and being able to treat the Sarah like she's her master, she starts to treat her with contempt, which means that she starts to act like she's better than her. Why is she doing that? Because she's able to bear a child for Abram, and that's the child that Sarai could not bear for him. So she starts to act like she's better. Now, before this, they probably had a normal agreement, a normal relationship. It was probably just like any other servant type of thing. And she might have been a favorite servant or something, but there was definitely a change in her. She thought she was better than her when she became pregnant. So this causes a rift in their relationship. So it says that Sarai said to Abram, now I like this because Sarai did not go and bicker with her servant. Because again, Sarai's here, Hagar's here. They are not on equal playing field. She went to her counterpart, Abram, and said, this is all your fault. What's happening between me and Hagar, this is your fault. Her treating me with contempt, this is your fault. Why? Because as the husband, Abram should be able to set the tone for how they run as a household, if you will. I'm not saying they were in the same tent, whatever. I'm saying the relationship should be established by him as the head of the household. And so she tells Abram that this is your fault because you got her pregnant and now she's acting like she's better than me. I'm your wife. I'm not the only wife technically because of Hagar, but I am the first wife. And that's not appropriate. So she's telling him, I put my servant into your arms. That means I have given permission for this to happen. But now that she's gotten what we've wanted, which is for you to bear a child, then she treats me with contempt like she's better than me. But she wouldn't have what she has without me. You see? So there needed to be respect. So she said, the Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. So I like how she said that too, because we're gonna let the Lord decide. We're gonna, since you talk to the Lord, and we're gonna let Him show who is right in the matter, whether or not she should be treating me this way, and how this relationship is supposed to go, what's appropriate. So Abram replied, I like how he replied too, because he's like, this is above me. I don't really care. This is not my slave. This is not my servant. Abram says, look, she is your servant. Deal with her as you see fit. So that means you have permission to handle her appropriately because of her disrespect, because she's treating you with contempt. She's acting like she's better than you. You have the ability to correct her. I don't. You, you don't have to go through me. It's not my fault that she's doing this, so you can correct her. So Abram kind of got it off himself. So Sarah treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. So that tells me that that happened over the course of maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe months. Who knows? I don't know. It doesn't tell us, but it says she finally ran away, which means that this was like a build up. So in order for Hagar to be put in her place, if you will, Sarai decides that she is going to treat her harshly. So it sounds like she is taking that vengeance in her own way, and she's putting that back on Hagar and saying, "Well, because you treated me this way, oh, I'm going to really show you who's in charge," and that resulted in Hagar running away, because who wants to deal with somebody who's treating me? Now, where it probably could have been handled the best way is for Abram to speak to the both of them and say, "This is this is what I want. This is what needs to happen. This is what's appropriate. You need to fix it." And then they would have maybe been able to work it out. But instead, it is a typical woman's like bickering back and forth, and you got Hagar doing whatever she doing, kind of poking at Sarai. And then you got Sarai poking back, and finally, Hagar runs away. So now we get to where Hagar meets an angel of the Lord. So it says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. Now I looked up where Shur was. I want y'all to know Shur is on the way to Egypt. It's like the wilderness. If you was to go south of where they were in Mamre, remember? That's where they were living in the Amorite community in Canaan. So you go south to go to the Negev, and then you go over westward to go to Egypt. So Shur is on that road to go to Egypt. She was better. He just did. I'm reading somebody's comments. I didn't know when you said that, but that's funny. Okay, so back to 7. Okay, so the angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness. So she's going back home. She said, "Bump this, I can go home," because she's going back to Egypt. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarai's servant, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my Mistress Sarai," she said. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." We have a problem with that word authority. Then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." We have a problem with the word authority because we don't want to be under authority. We think that it's we don't need anybody telling us what to do. We don't need anybody controlling us. We don't need that. We don't want to live that type of lifestyle. So I'm sure that's what Hagar was really dealing with. She didn't want to have Sarai under authority because now she really thought and felt like she was better. So by God saying this, and it says the angel of the Lord, but that's understood to be um, another phrase used for God. And I should have looked that one up in particular on Blue Letter Bible to convert that for you, but I'll try to do that in the newsletter that I send out tomorrow. But he says, first of all, he addresses her. Let's go back to 8. He addresses her as Hagar, Sarah's servant, Sarai's servant. So that's the title. That's what she's known by. That's how she's seen by God. Hagar, Sarai's servant. He asked her a question. Where have you come from? Where are you going? And then when he gives her an answer, again, he says, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. essentially Sarai, he's helping Hagar to see Sarai is still your mistress. She's still Lord over you. Not capital L Lord, but Lord, lowercase Lord. She's still Lord over you. She's still your master. You have to submit to her authority because that's the way that it is. Like this is the um what do you call it, hierarchy that I've developed. You are her servant. You leaving is not going to gain what you think is going to gain. The only way you're going to gain the blessing that you're supposed to gain is if you remain as her servant. So, what does she have to do? She has to go back in order to maintain the blessing that she's under. That happens with us all the time, right? In order to maintain the blessing, sometimes there might be a lot of fighting, contention, and you're like, this is not the environment that I want to be in. I'm talking preaching to myself. This is not the environment that I need to be in order to be blessed, in order to feel good. So let me get up out of this environment. And sometimes that can be like how you're being treated can be a sign of obviously something is wrong. But it never tells us that Hagar actually addressed the issue with Sarai. Hagar caused the issue because of her contempt. So Sarai's reaction was no better, but Hagar initially caused that problem. Sarai responded based on what Hagar did. Hagar never corrected herself. So what God is telling her to do is go and correct yourself. Go and humble yourself and submit to Sarai's authority, and the correction will happen. The blessing will flow. You will be able to have this child. You will be able to have other children. You'll be able to flow in what I still have something for you, even though you are Sarai's servant. And that can speak volumes to anybody because it doesn't matter what level you consider yourself on. If God still had plans for her, let me keep reading so that you see it says in verse 10, then he added, I will give you, after he tells her to submit, to go return to your mistress and submit to your authority, he says, I will give you more descendants than you can count. But this is sequential. Return home, submit to her authority. I will give you more descendants. The I will give you more descendants comes after she goes back through and resubmits herself to Sarai. And so she could not break the hierarchy of blessing that God had already designed for her in this moment when she's supposed to be submitted to Sarai, who is submitted to Abram. So he is reconfirming, I know you feel this kind of way. I know where you're going. I know you kind of feel this kind of way. But let's correct it. And the only way to correct it is if you go in humility. And that is a lesson for anybody who might be in any type of situation is go and correct it in humility, knowing your place, knowing how it's designed to be. If you are humble about it, God still has a blessing for you regardless of whatever the type of hierarchy that you're dealing with. And so we have to make sure that we are submitting properly to the Lord's authority. See, and it was good because the Lord gave her that reminder to go and submit. And sometimes we need that push that, okay, yeah, I am submitted to the right person, or I am supposed to be doing it this way. Because she left because she's like, this ain't right. I gotta go. And the Lord's coming back to correct her and remind her, no, this is right. You can go back. This is what I have for you. So, even in that situation, that was okay for her to deal with that because that's the way that she needed to hear from God and the way that she needed to um, operate. She was in the wrong, but even with her being in the wrong, she wasn't punished for it. God corrected her, and that is a very loving correction. The way that He did that, um, the way that He went and worked on her. Like He allowed her to come into the wilderness. He didn't correct her with Sarai and Abram. He corrected her when she came into the wilderness. He didn't let her have her whole pity party in the wilderness, run away, and said, "Hey, where have you come from and where are you going?" Like, imagine God stopping us in the middle of our situation happening, and He's like, "Hey, where are you going? What are you doing?" And we just tell him what we're doing, like it's nothing wrong. You know how you ask your child, "Hey, what you in there doing?" Nothing. And he's just able to come in. He don't start yelling, so don't start going and yelling at the kids. He didn't come in and start yelling. He said, "Return to your mistress. He gave an instruction. He said, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. And then he layered that with a promise. I will give you more descendants than you can count. Can you imagine the amount of hope that she feels in this moment where she's probably feeling really down because she probably never thought that she would have children because she was a servant. Um, she really got a hold of herself because the thing that she never thought would happen is happening. She is able to bear a child and be loved, and she feels like the maybe in her mind the place that she should have been rising to, she's having to stay at a lower level. And for God to come in that moment and really see like where she's struggling and just be able to correct her and tell her it's okay for you to be at the level that you're at. The level is not the problem. I'm still going to be able to bless you even though you're at the servant level. And I'm almost certain that that is all the hope that she needed to be able to carry out this pregnancy and to be able to go back and submit to her masters was the promise from God that, hey, I'm gonna give you more descendants than you can count. Y'all know that's the same thing practically that he said to Abram. And so for a servant to hear that same promise is comforting. That's why we know him as the comforter. It's reassuring her. There's nobody who is exempt from a promise, even a servant. There's nobody who is exempt from God's promise. And so he's able to do just as much with her in that he's able to correct her and love on her so much and able to promise her so much more than what she probably would have ever imagined. And who knows if she didn't go into this situation, like if she didn't go into the wilderness, she may have never heard that promise from God. She may have thought of herself lower. And this is really God equating her spiritually with everybody else. We all at the same level, even though right now in the physical she's a servant. He just equated her with everybody else. She gets the same promise. There is nobody who's richer who gets more promises than people who are poor. Everybody gets promises from God. Um, and so that's what I love about Hagar's story. Then on top of that, in verse 11, and the angel also said, so we got the instruction to return home, submit. I'm gonna give you these descendants. Then the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. So he's speaking specifically to the child she's pregnant with at the time. He has promised more descendants, like so down the road, he's promised more in the future. But right now, he's speaking to her current situation. You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. Okay, let's go to 11. You are now pregnant with and will give birth to a son. She gets what she's supposed to name this child. First of all, she probably, I don't even know if she knew at the time. It doesn't tell us if it was a boy or girl. So she gets confirmation of the gender. She gets a name for this son and the explanation of what it means. So imagine every time she says Ishmael, she's remembering that God heard her in the wilderness. Even though she was in the wrong, she was being corrected, God heard her. Every time she says her son's name, she's reminded that God hears. That's why I love biblical names, because they have so much deeper meaning than just like our everyday names. And it reminds us of who God is. Like God hears. That's amazing. Um, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. So that's even further explanation of the moment that she was in at the time. She is in the middle of the wilderness. I'm talking about a desert, right? You're in the middle of the wilderness. You're traveling alone. You're trying to go back home. You're probably crying. You're probably hungry. You're probably thirsty. You're probably disheveled. You're probably at your wits' end on what to do because you finally let all of this tension build up and you ran away from home. When you run away, you never run away with all your stuff. So you're not prepared. And so she's probably in this physical moment of distress, a mental moment of distress, an emotional moment of distress, just a wreck. But God heard her cry in the middle of her distress. And that, if you stop right there and that's all you got out of this, is that God heard Hagar's cry in the middle of her distress, then that's all you needed to get. Because it does not matter how low of a moment you get to, Ishmael, God hears. He hears your cry of distress. He hears you in your moment of weakness. He got you. He will take care of you. It's not for me to come in and save you at the moment to say, like, oh, well, it's going to be okay. No, she was able to hear directly from God because she had gotten to that point that she needed to hear from Him. And we each deserve to be able to get to a point where we can communicate with God ourselves and we can hear from Him, and be comforted, by Him. Okay, so now we're going to go to 12. Now she's getting some, so she got the current about who he's going to be. Now she's getting some future information on who he's going to be. So this is going to help prepare Hagar for that type of interaction with her son as he grows up. Your son will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. That means he don't find no discipline. He's not going to be trained well, in maybe a lot of just the etiquettes, if you will. He will raise his fist against everyone. He's a fighter. He's going to fight everybody, and everyone will be against him. Now, I don't know how do you combat that? How do you combat information when you're given about knowing how bad your son will be in the future? You have to, this is good preparation because she's going to have to accept of who he's going to be, and it's going to cause hostility. He says you will live in open hostility against all his relatives. Remember, Abram's household eventually is not just Ishmael, but you're talking about his relatives, Abram's whole household. He got a whole community of people. Open hostility is going to be Ishmael's future. Now, a lot of people talk about how this is foreshadowing um, the Muslim religion that ends up coming, and that Ishmael's descendants are those people. I'm not here to explain that because we have not gotten to um, even that portion of like scripture. Um, I'm really just walking through. I like to just walk through the story and take what it's giving you in the context that it's giving you at this time. And I love the fact that Hagar gets confirmation for herself on what she needs to do and the decision she needs to make that's best for her to remain under a blessing. Then she gets information, revelation, if you will, about who her child is now, what she's to do with that, and in the future to prepare her for what her child will bring. And that's the type of information that we need from God. Like whatever He's willing and able to reveal at the time, we want to be prepared to hear that. And so at this time, Hagar was able to hear that information and probably do something with the information to just prepare herself, prepare her heart for this hostility, this and maybe even bring it back to Abram to say like, this is what God told me about him. So people, you prepare. Everybody's child is not going to be the same. Everybody's not going to act good, if you will, or act the same discipline type of way or receive information the same way. So you know, it's good for you to have information about who that's going to be so you can prepare yourself and you can prepare other people for the differences, or even just provide some type of explanation as to this is who God designed him to be. How can I argue with who God designed Ishmael to be? I'm not to say like, oh, he wasn't a good child. Like that's who God designed him to be. Not good as in like a criminal or something, but like it's not the typical maybe discipline and things that people would expect. And so this is who God designed him to be. Okay, so then we're going to finish up with verse 13 and 14, 13 through 16. Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also said, "Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" So that well was named Ber Laharoi, Ber Laharoi, which means well of the living one who sees me. it can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. Now, when it's written like that, where it says it can still be found, at the time of this writing, when Moses is penning this information, it, the well that he's referring to could still be found. And I'm sure maybe there's an archaeological dig or something that maybe they found old wells. But like this is something that archaeology could even use to point to where it's located. And it's giving you location so that it's like, hey, we still have proof that this is the place that Hagar saw God. Hey, she saw the God who hears her in the wilderness. This is where she was. So like it's kind of like that sort of historical marker reference of where this happened. It says, so Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Okay, so thereafter, so that means from that point forward, when she was in the wilderness with God, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord. Now I love this. So last week we talked about El Elyon, and that was God Most High. Before we talked about what are some other? Oh, I know we talked about Lord God before. As another name, and Creator Elohim, right? So we've talked about different names that's given for God. About I think we've gotten up to four at this point. So this is the fourth one. El Roy. It's right here at the bottom if you can see this. El Roy is the Hebrew terminology for the God who sees me. And it says that that is the name that Hagar used to refer to the Lord. So instead of her saying just God, she would say El Roy. She's referring to him by how he is in relationship with her. So, how you view God is something that you can use to call him. God is kind of like such a basic foundational level. It's kind of like just basics of God because it's a title. So, it's kind of like somebody calling you Miss or Miss, Mrs. or Mr. Like it's a title. Hey, Miss, it's not wrong to call me Miss, it's just not my name. It's not wrong to call God God, it's just not his name. And so this is a good reminder at this point, just like Hagar did to call him by a name. Hagar is giving us a perfect example because she's using a name that is an endearing term for God. So not just saying God or Elohim as in, creator supreme of all things. No, El Roy, the God who sees me. This is a stamp that says this is how I developed a relationship with God. He is El Roy. He is the God who sees me. So it's like a taking it to another level. So it's not just a basic foundation of God. It's El Roy, the God who sees me. So imagine every time she's saying El Roy, she was reminding herself, she's confirming for herself that God sees her, that God sees you. And she's also telling other people, testifying by the name that she uses for God. She's testifying and saying, this is how God sees. He sees us. This is the God who sees you. He's just like he sees me. So we have permission to use other names for God. And as a matter of fact, I would employ us and encourage us to use his name. Whether you use the Hebrew Yahweh, whether you just shorten it to Yah, whether you use Yahuwah, whether you use Jehovah Gabor, lots of names that we continue to uncover. But whether you say Elohim, whether you say God Most High, El Elyon, you should be comfortable with, and it is okay to use the Hebrew and to call him by those names because it's describing your relationship. And when you speak of God, and I say El Elyon, for example, I'm reminding other people that he is the Most High God. I'm reminding myself that he is the Most High God. I'm speaking of him as the Most High God. I'm not just saying God. So that is a title. We got to come up to another level, just like Hagar did, because it says thereafter, from that point forward, she referred to him as El Roy, because she says, "You are the God who sees me. Have I truly seen the one who sees me?" So there was a place named in the wilderness, which this is describing as like a historical marker. And then after that, Hagar gave birth to Hagar gave Abram a son, Abram named him Ishmael. Where did that come from? From when God saw her in the wilderness and told her what to name him, meaning God hears. And then it tells us a timeline. So remember, it started in the top of 16 saying that this was 10 years after he moved from Haran. So that would have made him 85. Now it's saying by the time Ishmael is born, he's 86. So now we start to get this timeline of Abram's life, and I will include that in our Bible study um, booklet workbook. I will include like a brief timeline that we're going to start building with Abram's life, and you can fill that in tomorrow. And so those are our notes for this evening, and I hope that it was helpful to just walk through line by line the story. And most importantly, I hope that it was feeding you to be able to just see Hagar in this light that God sees her in, and how even in her situation where she was wrong, he was still loving and correcting her. He was still asking her a question. He was still waiting on her to respond. He was willing to give instructions patiently and still give her a promise. He didn't take away his promise because she did wrong. He was still able and willing to do that for her, just like he's able and willing to do that for us. And so, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them. I hope and pray that everyone has had a great week, and that if you haven't been reminded to tap into the Bible study guide, it is going out every week with the newsletter at the very bottom. The updated link is there at by close of business on Friday. And so that way you can just keep up with notes, and you can always have something to go back to and review. And in addition, um, if someone is interested in providing additional like faith materials to loved ones, especially Mother's Day is coming up. My devotional is online. I'm going to open a sale up this weekend for it, probably tomorrow, and be putting some information out about getting a 10% discount for the devotional on Etsy. So you can also look forward to that. All right, y'all. It has been a good one. And I will see y'all next week when we cover Genesis 17. Um, and until then, be blessed.